All right, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for coming to another Right Talk here at Tolson's Chapel. We invite your participation by coming on to our Facebook page and posting likes, and we also accept donations at tolsonschapel.org. We need you all very much to continue the work that we're doing. And today we have with us Rohulamin Quander. Now, I've known him for many years, and I'm just so happy to see you.
Thank you.
And the travel here. And I'm sure when you saw ZSun-nee Matema on your phone or your Facebook page to come here, you probably were thinking, what is this? What's this going to be about? As a matter of fact, I think we talked at Mount Vernon. That's when I first proposed that idea to you. Well, this is his book, The Quanders. What a story. And so we're just going to have a good time. I'm going to let you hold your book.
Thank you.
And I guess the first thing I want to say is, where we met. We met at Mount Vernon. Why did we meet at Mount Vernon? Because we were...
Well, we have ancestors who were enslaved to George Washington at Mount Vernon many years ago. And of course, we know Carolyn Branham, your direct ancestor, was Martha Washington's personal maid. And the Quander family has been identified with Mount Vernon since at least the 1750s, not under the name Quander, under the name Clark, because the free part of the family married in right after later on. So the Quanders have been in Maryland since the 1670s, documented. And our first real document starts in 1684, but we're recognized now in Charles County, Port Tobacco, from the 1670s. So I'm delighted to be here so we can talk about that.
Well, I'm delighted to have you too. And one of the things too is that people meet on the road of their commonality. We met at Mount Vernon because we had a common interest there as descendants, but some take it a little bit further. Now, I must say, you've done the great work.
Thank you.
You have. And I'm hoping that my friends will stop telling me, why haven't you written your book? Dismiss of that today. Here's my friend. He's written the book. That's good enough right now. That's good enough. For the moment.
Everybody's got a story.
I'm
sure Carolyn Branham and all of that is a very good story.
It's a big story.
Her name shows up several times.
Yes.
And descendants also show up later on.
Oh, yes.
At the Arlington House with Robert E. Lee, his wife, Marianna Randolph Custis Lee, who was Martha Washington's great-granddaughter. She had some of Carolyn's descendants in service then.
Yes,
so you have that legacy. You have a double legacy.
I actually have a double legacy. But today, we're going to talk about the tremendous legacy that you have. And tell us about your book. What inspired you? Well, we know what inspired you to write your book, but what actually was the thrust that pushed you into doing all of the research that it took from America to Africa, and I like to say, and back again to America.
Okay. Well, this book is the culmination of many years of effort. The Quander family's documented presence, as I mentioned, goes back to 1670s here in Maryland. And over time, as people in the family would be going to reunions, in fact, this weekend, starting today, begins the 96th annual Quander family reunion. This weekend, today, tomorrow, and Sunday. So as we picked up stories a little bit here, a little bit there, what this person did, what that person did, this person would tell me something, that person would add something to it, not knowing what this person told me, and these stories began to come together. There began to be some meat on those bones, and then some skin on those bones, on the meat. And then as time went on, and I began to realize some of the in the family who had done so many great things over a sustained period of time, I said, and others said too, we can't let this drop. We have got to continue this legacy. When we talk about going down to Mount Vernon from Old Town Alexandria, the old days you used to catch the train and go down there, and then later the horse path, and then later an automobile path, which is now a highway. And Susie Quander said, she's gone to glory now. She says, well, you know, my grandfather was on the crew in the 1850s that cleared the road to go down and create the horse path. So that's very important, where Louis Quander was involved. And then later on, and this is still later, Nellie Quander, who's one of his granddaughters, was very, very involved. She was the first national president of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. There's a lot of history there. Yes. And then Nellie Quander was so involved in the suffrage movement. They did a big article in August 2020, which was in the time frame of getting the passage of the 19th Amendment with women getting women's suffrage. Nellie Quander was right at the core of that. And they looked at some of the women who were less recognized. And the New York Times picked up 8 people to feature. 7 women, and 1 man. The 1 man is Frederick Douglass. But Nellie Quander was one of the 7. And this is a huge story in the New York Times. So we had such a strong legacy of creation of these things. And as we are in this interview today, I'll talk about that. The Quanders in military service. That's an exhibit we had at a family reunion recently, because the family was very involved in fighting the Civil War and in staging their leadership and their presence before the war. And then after the war, building up as property owners in Prince George's County and in Fairfax County, and then coming into the district. Now I realize right now we're not in that part, but we are in Washington County, aren't we? Is this Washington County?
This is Washington
So
County?
here we are, George Washington.
I said that. When I came up here, I said, well, George Washington just is going to be with me no matter where I go.
So we have such a strong legacy of Mount Vernon. Documented well the 1759 census he took there. And Suki Bay, who was Nancy Carter Quander's mother, she is listed in the census. So we know they were there in the 1750s. We don't know how much earlier we could find out. But we have such a strong, consistent presence in Washington, D.C., which is flowered and based and rooted in Maryland history and in Virginia history. So the Quander family's contributions are sustained from then to now, but we have to have a level of humility about it because we don't brag on it. We want people to understand that whatever we have done, everybody can do something. Everybody can do something. You may be able to do as much as we. You may be able to do more.
That's very true.
And everything builds on everything else. I just mentioned military service. Yes. So John Pearson Quander, Nellie Quander's father, was a Civil War veteran. But guess what? The Quander family is the only African-American family, maybe the only family in the United States, that has 4 generals. 4. Now, 3 of them have the last name of Brooks because the mother was Quander. And the wife of General Leo Brooks, his wife was a Quander. And then 2 sons, Leo Jr. and Vincent, Keith Brooks, they are generals. And then now Mark Quander. And so of the 3 African-American commandants at West Point, there have been 3. 2 of them are Quanders.
Well, you know, what I want to ask you is,
including the president, Mark Quander.
Okay, including the president. But, you know, your own life story is quite interesting.
Thank you.
What I want to say is that this is actually Judge Rohulamin Quander, and I want you to tell us a little bit about your personal journey, and then we can go back, and that will, I'm sure, enable people to understand why you feel that, you know, doing what you're doing is so important. Tell us about your journey.
Well, let me say this. I'll start with my mother's side, then I'll come back to my father's side.
Okay.
My mother was born in Barbados. And my mother's father, my grandfather, was from Calcutta, India. Oh. So that's where the Rohulamin comes from. I'm bearing my grandfather's name. He was.
Thank you. I always wanted to know. I said, when Rohulamin comes, but thank you. Okay.
Yeah, we're from Calcutta. I've been there.
Oh, fabulous.
So he left India, went to Barbados in 1913. And in an arranged marriage, after he got there, we hear he was 32. We also hear he was 36. But one thing we know, my grandmother was 16. So he married a 16-year-old in an arranged marriage, had 7 children, which my mother was the first. And she was of Indian, Irish, and Scottish, a little bit of Afro-Caribbean ancestry. And she came to the United States in 1934, came to Washington, D.C. We got to Pearl Harbor. when they were recruiting, quote, government girls, as they call them. So she came here in December 41, met my father. It was so funny. She met him about 3 weeks later, January 42. They became keeping company, as we say, and around Valentine's Day, got engaged in June, got married in December. It was a very busy year, 1942. And I was born 12 months later, 1943, December the 4th, 1943. Now, on my father's side, besides the Quanders, of which we hear so much, it's very interesting that my father's mother is from South Carolina. And her ancestry, I'm talking about on the white side of the family, of course, these all came through enslavement. But her side of the family, the Frasers, F-R-A-Z-I-E-R, sometimes spelled with an S, they were Civil War patriots. And Frederick Fraser was a great-great-grandfather, very involved in South Carolina politics. And Alexander Fraser, who preceded, he lent South Carolina 30,000 pounds, I don't know if that is in dollars, to fight, to fund and train and clothe the South Carolina militia during the American Revolution. I am eligible, but I have never petitioned to become a son of the American Revolution. I am eligible, and I've been asked several times to do it, but at my age now, I'm not interested in pursuing it. But this is where we came from. But we have a very strong sense all around of lifting others as we climb. We never forget, and as a member of the Omega Psi Phi fraternity, dedicated to manhood, scholarship, perseverance, uplift, and service, we never forget, and I never forget, that as I reach up somewhere, I have to not only go up, but I have to look down and reach down and bring somebody with me. So that's been my life, basically.
And you have written a book also about your years with the Omega Psi Phi.
Well, yes. Actually, I'm a four-time. This is the fourth one.
Okay.
The first book, my father was a juvenile diabetic. He was probably born with it, but it was not diagnosed. It was noted to breakdown at age 3 and a major breakdown at 5. So it was confirmed in 1924. They said he wouldn't live to be 10 years old. He lived to be 86. Insulin rescued him. And so his story was Quantum Quality, the true story of a Black trailblazing diabetic. That was 2006. The second book came out in 2008. Nellie Quander, I mentioned her as the first Supreme Basilisk. That's the national president of the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority. So on their centennial, 1908-2008, I wrote that book. I've been giving lectures about her all several years. So that book is out and very popular, still doing well. The third book was looking at my memoirs as then a 50-year member of the Omega Psi Phi fraternity, coming up to 58 years now. In that book, my legacy in Omega goes back to 1931. So it's 50 plus Omega-inspired years tracing a legacy to 1931. And that's related to the principles I just talked about, plus service. So I followed my father's steps. He follows in his older brother's steps. His older brother was old enough to be his father. So this book, which is the one that just came out this year, February 2021, is many stories, and they're not necessarily connected to the story before. Many different stories about the Quander family in Maryland, in Virginia, and the District of Columbia.
Do I need to feel very strange because I'm Zeta Phi Beta? I just want to put that up.
No, you're part of the Divine Nine of sororities and fraternities. I was with a good Zeta Phi Beta lady yesterday. But people say, well, how can I get this book? Well, I'm going to tell you. You can, even though you can get it from Barnes & Noble and Amazon, if you get it from me, it will be personally autographed. It will have a history stamp in it, and it will have a Quander stamp. So the price is the same. The price is the same. It comes in paperback and in hardcover. Very easy. www.quanderquality.com. Put the www because it'll take you right to the website. If you don't, you'll get there, but you'll be wandering on other Quander stories before you find it. So www.quanderquality.com. So this is the new book. And this past year, which is still going on, because of Evelyn Brooks Higginbotham, who's the national president of the South Association for the Study of African American Life and History. she and I went to Howard together.
Mm-hmm.
And she said to me, when she knew the book was coming, she said, "Will it be ready by Black History Month, February 1st?" I said, "I'm doing my best." And it was issued on January 31st.
Oh,
So we say February 1st. And she was very gratified. So what happened, because this book came, it just burst on the scene. I did 4 federal presentations of 4 federal agencies. I did, Tuskegee Airmen had their 80th anniversary, and they asked me to be one of the 2 keynote speakers because of this book.
Mm-hmm.
And then Fairfax County, which is in Virginia, for Women's History Month, wanted to feature African American women in Fairfax County, and they found out about this book. So they said, "Okay, we want you to feature 4 Quander women in Fairfax County." So that's what I did. So those are presentations, and I've got others coming in the fall in 2022.
I just want to point out that this beautiful cover
Yes.
was in great part due to your wife's artistic talents.
Right. My wife is a professional artist, born in Washington, D.C., trained here at the Corcoran in Washington, Art Students League, New York, NYU, New York, and then she put the icing on the cake at the Reverend Academy of Fine Arts in St. Petersburg, Russia. So she is a well-known and recognized artist. And in my 4 books, she has painted the cover of 2 of them. And the other 2 have pictures, and she took the pictures on the other 2.
So we want to
very well
Carmen
recognized.
as well.
That's right.
Okay.
And yeah, Carmen Torreya Quander. And this theme of this, you can't see it, but it's from the White House, from the outhouse to the White House, excuse me. Yeah, no, I'm just going to say you can't really see it there. But right in the corner is the peaking, right up here is sort of like a little outhouse. This is all Quander Road in Alexandria, Virginia. But the reason it's on the back cover, again, you can't see it too well, but this lady here, Gladys Quander Townsend, is this gentleman's granddaughter. And this is her grandmother looking the other toward the side. And this is their granddaughter in with President Clinton and then Senator Robb. Here I am here. And they're Quander Road. And I should mention to you that we're very blessed. We have 4 Quander streets in the area. We have Quander Road in Alexandria. We have Quander Street in Prince William County. We have Quander's Promise in Bowie, and the original Quander, they call it Place, some people call it Alley, was in Washington, D.C., and it was there in about the 1890s. And then during World War II, it disappeared because they expanded the Navy Yard, and Quander Street and Van Street disappeared. Well, the city council put it back. And just, it went back on the maps in 2015. But in May, just a couple of months ago, the street sign went up. So it is there. If you come out of the Nationals Park baseball stadium and you go into the metro, you get off to go to the metro, you can go to the left or you go to the right. If you go to catch the entrance on the right, you have to walk by Quander Street. It's there. And so we're very gratified of Quander Street being restored in the District of Columbia.
And I think that's wonderful. Yeah. Because people need, when they see the name, they may reflect on the history and the legacy.
Yes.
I just want to say, here you are showing this beautiful picture of a woman that I knew, Gladys quite well during my time at Mount Vernon as a reenactor.
Yes.
And she was a very strong-willed woman, and she knew her history, and she was not to be turned around. So I will always remember Gladys. Yeah.
Well, the words that you were saying about her are so true because in 1995 at Mount Vernon, well, let me go back a bit. Being a Quander, I went to Mount Vernon all the time from childhood. But as a child, it was just a place to go. I didn't have an appreciation or understanding of the family's sustained legacy there. So as I began to understand more about it, my father knew Gladys from the 1930s because they both went to Minor together. So Minor Teachers College in Washington, D.C., which is now part of the University of District of Columbia. So when they were planning, well, I shouldn't say planning, in the late 70s, early 80s, the question came up about the Negro servants. I'm using that term of art because I'm going there to explain something. There were some of the ladies that said, I think we should do a little more. We put a plaque to recognize the presence in 1929. It was a flat marker, which was overgrown. Nothing was going. People didn't know where it was. So in the early 80s, Dr. Lillian Anthony, she was aware of it, and she was teaching at one of the Northern Virginia universities, I don't remember which one. And she said to her students, "You need to go there and look for that marker." And they went there, a cold day, and they found it. And they said, "Well, this is really a shame that no recognition of the people who labored here, literally, who built this place." And so Dorothy Gilliam, the Washington Post, picked it up. And there was an article that appeared in the Washington Post, I forget when, I think it was 82, and talked about the fact that these were forgotten. Well, on the side story, when I was coming along, we would see the signs about this is servants' quarters. And I remember saying to my father, because I was a teenager or very young, I said, these people weren't servants, these people were slaves. And of course, I don't use the word slave now, I use the word end slave, because it means against their will. And I said to my father, this is really something I didn't realize other people were agitating the same thing. So what happened, we ended up with a letter writing. A lot of people wrote to Mount Vernon saying, you need to give these people recognition for what they were. Call them slaves because that's what they were. And the pushback, I call it pushback, was the response was, well, we only use the term that they use. And our comment was, yeah, because they knew it was wrong and they didn't want to use that word. That's why. So that was the beginning. So gradually they took that word servant down, they put the word slave up, and then Dorothy Gilliam's article came in that time frame. So they had a contest at Howard University they said we need to do something more visual. And the idea of an upright marker was part of it. And so they had a contest at Howard. They had several teams, 6 major teams competing. And David Edge was a senior in architecture. His team won. And the design you see of Mount Vernon, the upright marker, faith, hope, and love that recognized the African Americans who served there, dedicated in 1983, was David Edge's work product. And Dean Robinson, I don't know why his first name was evaded me because he and I grew up together. He was a year ahead of me in school. But anyway, Dean Robinson shepherded the group. And so they dedicated that. And every year, even though they put that in 83, but every year since about 91, we've had a tributary program recognizing Mount Vernon Ladies Association, joined with the Black Women United for Action. Are you part of the organization? Yes. They have had Sheila Coates, the president, retiring now. We've had a program every year. It's always been somewhere between the last Saturday in September and the first Saturday in October. And it's going to be the first Saturday in October, I think. We recognize it's called Tribute to Mount Vernon Ancestors. So you don't have to be a descendant of a Mount Vernon enslaved. It can be anybody.
Yes.
Governors, senators, ambassadors come there. And we even went to the White House with President Clinton. The day this picture was taken, and you see President Clinton holding, that's a little memorial that we gave to him. I have a larger picture of Sheila Coates, several of the people in it. So this is another picture we took. So this little marker here in the corner, this is the marker, a replica of the slave memorial at Mount Vernon, because we wanted to tell the story of men, women, and even children who served in that capacity. And just last month, Mount Vernon closed an exhibit called Lives Bound Together. Slavery at George Washington's Mount Vernon. You and I were consultants on that. And the city would put it there for 2 years. And it stayed at the end of the 2 years. It was so popular, said it was only temporary, we'll put it there for 2 more years. And then it would continue to be popular. I said, okay, we're going to bring it to an end now. So it just closed last month, July 2021. And it was there for 4 years and 10 months. And they got the placement exhibits where we own the history of how Mount Vernon came to be Mount Vernon. That's the new exhibit that they're working on. It'll open later this year. And now that exhibit, Lives Bound Together, Slavery at George Washington's Mount Vernon, continues, but it's virtual. You'll be able to get, maybe not every single thing, but you'll be able to get a significant part of it online. And if you go there, you're going to find Carolyn Brown, her ancestor, and Nellie Quander, my ancestor, and others featured there. Oni Judge, and Hercules, and Frank Lee, and all of those good people who served the Washingtons. And a lot of people don't realize that when Mount Vernon, when George Washington died, he had over his lifetime about 500 enslaved people over his lifetime. But on the day of death, there were 317, and 123 were in his service. They rented a group that they returned, and then the rest was Martha Washington. But Martha's dower had more than George Washington.
That's right, and that's the thing that was so painful, I'm sure, for people who had married. When Martha's dower enslaved people had married with General Washington's enslaved people, and when General Washington passed, there was a question: what was going to happen? Would those marriages be pulled apart? Because he had said that he would never separate the families.
Well, what he said, when you're dead, things happen differently.
That's true. And then, of course, when Martha died, the children or the enslaved people were sent back to the Custis family because, after all, that was their home base, I guess you'd say. They were enslaved and sent with her to sort of serve her during her lifetime. And after that, you just go back and, and everything happens to you, who knows. But that's how some of our ancestors ended up at Arlington. Because that was George Washington Parke Custis' home that he built for his wife.
Well, you see what happened, what you're saying is absolutely correct. George Washington didn't like to separate families, but there's some history where he did sometimes anyway. And the other thing, he postponed the ones that were in his service, 123, he postponed when they could leave because he said they had to stay until Martha died. And then there was so much agitation that she issued she decided to let them go. And she told them on the anniversary of George Washington's death, December 14, 1800, that she was going to free them, they could leave as of January 1st, 1801. So that's what they did. But unfortunately, those who were in her dower, when they went back to the Custis family, Custises were not concerned. So they ended up being scattered. And some of them were married to Washington. Of course, marriage in this case was common law, was not ceremonial. It was scattered. And as they scattered, they broke families up terribly. And then subsequently, some ended up at the Arlington House in service to George Washington Parke Custis, George Washington's step-grandson. And Robert E. Lee married into that family. Some went here, some went there, some went other places. But now, the interesting point is that the Quander ancestors who were there, you probably heard, well, let's go back. Bushrod Washington was George Washington's nephew, and he inherited Mount Vernon from his uncle. So, but he couldn't come until Martha died. Martha died in the summer of 1802.
That's right.
And Bushrod came in later in 1802, like maybe September or October. And a lot of people think that's the institution of slavery ended when Martha and George died, but it's not true. Bushrod brought a whole new group there, so they didn't get free until emancipation. And among those people that were there is a man named West Ford.
Yes.
And West Ford, as they say, born of a slave named Venus and a quote unknown father. Well, that's kind of a joke. It's sort of hiding in plain sight. And people know who his father was. I'm not here to proclaim who his father was. I will say it's alleged, as you hear me clear my throat.
Yes, I did.
That Bushrod Washington was his father. And West Ford is the definite ancestor of the Quander family. So that is the blood connection of the Quander family from Mount Vernon to George Washington. That's the connection. Now, all of the Quanders are not from Mount Vernon, because we have to clarify that, because there were four main branches of the Quander family, two from Maryland and then two from Virginia. But the two from Virginia came out of the Maryland. So those who were at Mount Vernon appear to have come from Maryland at an earlier time. So all of them are related to George Washington, but the earlier, older branch of which I'm a part Maryland side. We're not descended from George Washington because we were on the other side of the street of the river, the Potomac or Potomac. So that branch is definitely descended from Bushwick, apparently, allegedly. Now, I'm clarifying this because if you catch a soundbite on television, they don't explain all of that. They'll just say the Quanders descended from George Washington's family ancestor, Bushrod Washington. They'll leave it at that.
Right.
But I'm clarifying the rest of the story because this document we're creating is for posterity. And so somebody, I don't want to claim I am related to George Washington by blood, even though my cousins are. Okay.
I got you. You know, I just want to say before we go, we have not even talked about the journey to Africa.
Yes.
Can you give us a little bit of a capsule?
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, what happened there is very simple. I won't call it very simple. I went to Howard University in 1961, and there were a lot of students from various places in Africa there. And I was an international pal. We have we have the campus pals who deal with the students from around the country. We have the international pals trying to help settle in those students from outside of the nation. I was an international pal. And talking to different students, they would be calling me Mr. Quando. They didn't know how to spell it. They would call me Mr. Quando, and I was correcting. And I didn't think anything of it because I wasn't in this place yet. I was 17, 18 years old. Had to be a little older to begin to grasp what it was that happened, what was happening. So one day a student called me Mr. Quando, and I said, no, the name's Quando. He said, you don't even know the origin of your name. I said, what do you mean? He said, we all know that came from West Africa. We even know where it came from. It came from the area of the Gulf of Guinea, most likely from Ghana. So I said, well, and then we got into the question of spelling. And I was spelling the name Q-U, and they say, no, it's K-W. And I say, well, in the Akan language, that name is known, Quando, Quando.
Yes,
and it's, well, I can't say exact conversation, but it emerged over time that Quando is A-M-K-W-A-N-D-O-H. Quando. So it looks like, we believe, that the forebear was asked the name and said, Quando. To untrained ears, Quando, Quando. I am Quando. In English, Anglo QU, in Akan KW. So that was a clue as to where we came from. And we talked to some older family members, and these people gone to glory. And they said, yeah, but you know, we heard back there somewhere, pointing over her shoulder. The name used to be Quando, but somebody, we think it was a census taker, dropped the ER.
Of course, because most of them were illiterate. So they only, what they thought they heard was what they wrote down.
When we checked some records, we found it was apparently the census of 1800. The O fell off, and in some places ER, in other places ERS, Quanders. And then further research, when we went back even into the early 1700s, we discovered that it was even misspelled ER as far back as about 1720, even though it's O. And that was very interesting because we were parallel with Quando and Quander. And when we celebrated our 300th anniversary in 1684, 1984, even though we've gone back later, earlier, the question came up is, do we want to change our name and put the O back? And I said, no, we'll leave it where it is. So we didn't change. But that was very interesting to discover that. So eventually, we got more and more information that was very strongly suggested of Ghana, West Africa. Not just Gulf of Guinea, but a particular place, and a particular place in the place. So the Quando family, which is spread all over the country now, was concentrated in Cape Coast, in an area in Cape Coast, and particularly in another area called Salt Pond. So when we were preparing for our tricentennial, 84, we wrote some letters in 83 to the newspaper inquiring, and we received over 100 responses. and a lot of stories and different things about things that went on, people that went on, people who were snatched. And eventually, when we had the tricentennial in '84, we had some of the Ghanaians to come here. They were already in the country, but they came to the tricentennial and they celebrated. And we are still in touch with them. And just this past December, two of those that we went and stayed in their house in Ghana when we went there in '91, they came here for an extended visit, and they were right here in the Maryland. We were up and they were in Frederick, so we got with them 3 or 4 times. I took them around sightseeing and everything. And so the Quander family, the Quander family, we have this relationship, and we discovered that in Ghana, when the language finally started getting written, because it originally wasn't, that some of them in Ghana are spelling the name QU instead of KW.
So they.
And they also about the Amakwandos, the Amun Quandos, the Amu Quandos, the Quandos. They're all the same ancestral family. And they came over and they migrated from the Abyssinian highlands over. They started around 900, and they came to settle in the 1400s. They couldn't walk any further. There was the ocean. They came to settle in that area. So that is an extended family. But unlike us, they don't celebrate family reunions and what have you because they've just been there. They know that ancestrally, the thousands of them, I guess, they are the same root going back who knows how many years. But in the process, we picked up, we don't know whether Edum Quando is our exact ancestor, but he's a primary candidate. So we know where he lived, where he was snatched, and approximately when he was snatched. So the story we have in the family of the two brothers brought here to Maryland from the islands, and the island at that time was Barbados, most likely. We don't know whether that was Edum Quando or not. It could have been. He could have been one of two, or he could have been the father of the two. So we call him candidate. So we kind of know where we're from. So when I was writing the book, we talked about Ghana. I said, I need to take a DNA test because I want to find out. I can't prove that that's who we're descended from. But I like to establish by our DNA that we are at least mine and others in the family. And fortunately, it's confirmed. So we will confirm, me personally, I have a drop of Nigerian, Sierra Leonean, Ghanaian, India. And the other thing that was surprising, we have a lot of almond eyes, mine are not as obvious. And we were thinking on Indian side that we might have some Chinese too.
Well, that's
We're
right.
Burmese. It came back Burma.
Could very well be.
Not my father's side, it's my mother's side.
But it could very well be because, you know, the San people in Africa, which are supposedly the oldest people from which the DNA has been taken, they also have the same, people would call Asian eyes. So sometimes when people say that, oh, I have Asian eyes, I say, well, wait a minute, now maybe you have African eyes. But you just don't know. You just don't know. But I want to tell you something. Having known you for so many years, I am so proud of what you have done.
Oh, thank you.
It's a pleasure that we met in this life and that we were able to share, because we did come together to create a descendants group, and now there's a new descendants group. So, and so it continues.
The Mount Vernon slave descendants, the League of the Mount Vernon slave descendants.
It's the new one.
Yes, the new one. Because we did an effort some years ago and it didn't quite get off the ground, but now this one is off the ground. The Syphax family, which is another very well-known family. They're in the Chin family as well. Yes. And we have several other families that are in, and of course we know this legacy is already going on at Monticello.
Yes.
It's going on at some of the other plantations.
What is the other one? Not just Monticello, but
Montpelier.
Yeah,
James Madison.
Did you attend? I was there.
The conference.
And it was that conference
on teaching slavery.
If they do it again, you must come. I guess.
I was there.
Were you there?
Yes. You don't remember. It's been a few years.
Oh,
well, maybe they had more than one.
No, they had one just a couple of years ago.
I was there. It was a cold weekend in February.
No, this was summer. So
all right,
then. Had another. But still, I mean, the feeling I got was, here's what I know. If you were from Virginia and you were enslaved on any of those three properties, you probably are kin some kind
That's
of way.
right. That's right.
So we've all figured that out. You know, you got a kin already because.
And even if we are not what kin, our ancestors knew each other.
That's
now,
right.
I realize that the Quander ancestors were primarily at River Farm, and Carolyn and others were at Mansion House. But over the time, there were probably interactions and connections and relationships.
Of course.
So I'm very comfortable in knowing that our forebears interacted in some way, shape, or form.
That's right.
And I like to say that it's important for people to understand. I say this because I'm a certified tour guide in the District of Columbia, but I go to Mount Vernon all the time.
Yes.
And when we go to the Slave Memorial site, I always say to my group, including the young man that I had down there recently, that George Washington, and then I add others, Thomas Jefferson, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, Benjamin Franklin, all of these were people who owned and enslaved people. They were able to become the great men that they became. Absolutely. Because they knew that the home fires, the home front was being taken care of. So they didn't have to worry themselves with getting the crops in, getting the crops out. George Washington's case, running the fisheries, running the brewery, running the distillery. All of that was being done by the unsung. And I say, you've got to remember the founders of this nation were the men and the women and even the children who did all of this work. So the founders were these enslaved Africans, whose names we don't know in many cases, or who we know by name only. And they are the bedrock of what George Washington was able to do with all of these other great men, and give them that greatness, what they were able to do because of what those who were not recognized did, the sweat of their brow. And I always emphasize, because when we talk about Louis Quander clearing the road, of course he didn't do it by himself, but clearing the road so that the wagons could get through to go down to Mount Vernon and up to Old Town. That was heavy work, felling the trees and digging all of that up. And he died in his 40s, so I don't know what could have been consumption. That was it. But he was very, very much involved in others likewise, paving the way, building the pyramids, if you will, the stumbling blocks, the stepping stones, taking life's lemons and making lemonade. So
I've always thought that we know and recognize the white founding fathers, but I've always said that it was the African enslaved people were also founding fathers and mothers.
Absolutely.
And we can't forget that. And with books like this and the one I'm going to write, hopefully soon one day, we will have more of the legacy of these wonderful people. Yeah. So
I'm gonna tell you, mention the site again, www.quanderquality, Quander, quanderquality.com. Be sure to put the www. If you just put Quander Quality, you'll get there, but you'll be all over the place before you get there. Barnes & Noble, Amazon, but if you get it from me, same price, but it will be personally autographed. They have a Quander history stamp, and it'll have an autographed author stamp as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Quander. Thank you so much.
Appreciate
Thank you for your long-term friendship as well.
Yes, let's continue that.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm ZSun-nee Miller Matema, and I'm very glad to have had you join us today to listen to this great story of the Quanders, and there will be others. And remember, if you wish to contribute, please find us at tolsonschapel.org. And we thank you so much for your participation and your loyalty to us. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.